Seryoso. Okay, can I start now? Okay. So hi, good evening everyone. So hopefully okay guys, hopefully you guys are still okay with the talks. I've been enjoying the presentation so far. But hi, my name is Jelvin Base. I am my title is UX designer and a UI designer, or X. I left Maya 8 back in October last year, and I'm currently working as a freelance graphic designer. So logo design, lettering, and all things type. But that's not the thing I'm gonna talk about today. You've seen the title of the presentation, so I'm gonna talk about finding your perfect type. So napapansin ko na all of the topics are related to like romance or sex. So I think we're way past Valentine's, but I think the topics check out, so I really love it. So I'm gonna be talking about the relation of typography and user experience. The things that I'm gonna be sharing today are basically my notes, my mental notes. This is like a version 2 of a presentation that I gave like a decade ago, and opinions have changed. But more or less, typography is 100% related to user experience. Okay, so let's first define what typography is. This is a definition that I subscribe to by Matthew Butterick, who is a type designer and an author. He says that typography is the visual component of the written word. So how do we further simplify that? There are two aspects in typography. There's the text and the typography. So say that you're going through a highway, right? So you're running at over 60 kilometers per hour. So if you're trying to look for a sign, which one is more legible? The one in the left or the one in the right? Like, obvious answer is the one in the right. No, I'm just joking. Yeah, but you wouldn't want to see something like this on a highway, right? It's so hard to read, right? So the idea here is like typography is basically just the idea and execution. So the text is your content, so what you're trying to say, and the typography is how you execute it. Hence, idea and execution. And who is typography for? Obviously, typography is for your readers. And this is another definition that I like from Matthew Butterick. So intentional typography means that you can be also intentional with the reading experience. And so his quote says, attention is the reader's gift to you. So like what I said, being intentional with your typography means that you value your reading experience or the reading experience of your users. Yeah, and going back, the title of my talk was finding the perfect type, right? So my personal belief that typography is a lot like love. So and I'm gonna be your wingman for the next 7 minutes. Yeah, or wingdings. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, let's start. You wouldn't want to head it on a date without anything, right? So you want to have a strong foundation. Yeah, and a strong foundation means like starting with the basics of typography. And I'm going to share you some resources that you can get into in case you really want to dive into like what typography is. From Matthew Butterick, this is a website called Practical Typography, where he runs down like the general usages of what typography is. He also gives you like tidbits that you can apply, not just in print, but also, well, for me, I think it also applies to UX. If you want to dive deeper, you can learn about like terminologies, like you just search for type terms, and you can see a website that teaches you kind of like a flashcard type of presentation where you can click on each part of like the letter, and then it's gonna explain to you what it is, what the terminology is. It's gonna be really helpful if you learn this down the line. But if you want something to read physically, I suggest Thinking with Type by Ellen Lupton. I have the version 2, the second edition of the book. It has been really a helpful resource for me when it comes to like having a foundation. So okay, now you're ready. You have like the basics, so you step into like dating. So first impressions last. And what am I trying to say here? Just like in dating where you're trying to start to have a conversation, it's kind of like the same with typography, where the type of fonts that you use will give an impression of like what the reading experience will entail to. So my opinion, what I'm trying to say here is try using fonts other than Helvetica or like system fonts. Back then, I would probably say that avoid Helvetica because it's lazy, avoid system fonts, but because it's you haven't thought it out. But recently there has been a change or a shift in style. Like for example, the recent album by Playboy Cardi is just a sans serif on top of serif, right? Or like Brat, the album from last year, is like just freaking Arial. Like, yeah, so in the realm of UX, I would still try to find something else other than like a Helvetica or system fonts. So where would you find these? So the obvious answer is like Google Fonts. So one of the repositories that I usually look up to, that look into, is like the most popular tab with Google Fonts. So there's like a lot of these are extremely usable. Okay, that's so a lot of these are extremely usable, and it's already open source, so you can choose fonts from these from this repository into your project. So if you say that okay, there's too much fonts, like one helpful resource that you can look up to is a page by TypeWolf, which is a the top 40 best Google fonts that you can choose. So even from years back, like when I first stumbled upon this website, I've been using this as a resource to like find the perfect font for the project that I'm working on. So yeah. And another website that I really look into as well is called FontShare. So it's a type repository for open source fonts by Indian Type Foundry. So if you're very anal with typography, you probably know Satoshi and all those like fancy looking fonts. Like you can get them freely here from FontShare. Highly recommend it. Okay, so it's about it's all about body language. So what am I trying to say here? When it comes to typography, there are two usages. One is the body text and one is display. Me personally, it's always imperative for me to choose the body type first because 95% of the content is within the body. So just to prove a point, here's an example. So this is an article from Rappler, and I changed the font to just like prove a point that if you go to a news website and you're trying to like read an article, like seeing something like this is so hard to like parang hirap basahin because the weight is so hard. The weight is so heavy and like it's a little bit tiring to read through it. Fun fact: the font that I use called Bota one. Anyway. But comparing this to this, PT Serif, which is the font that they're using, it's a lot easier to read. So you have to really nail down the body text first before you actually do the display. The display is very easy. Okay, I have 1 minute left. Okay, I'm halfway through, so it says size does matter. So what am I trying to say here? Yeah. So scale your type properly and avoid the pentameter. Yeah. So, yeah. So there will be moments in your project where you're trying to find like the perfect type scale, right? So you start with the body text, and then what you do is you add five pixels for it, and then add another 5 pixels for H1 to H6. I would avoid doing that and use modular scale instead. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of you are familiar with this, but you're basically trying to put a base font size and then put a ratio so that it gives you the numbers that you need whenever you're designing for a visual design library. Typescale is a website that I use personally, but it's paid. But what happens here is you can upload your own type and then it shows like a snippet or a content structure that's based on like the base size and the scale that you're using. Highly recommended. Taking the lead. So what I'm trying to say here is to establish content hierarchy. I think this was discussed already back then a while ago, but yeah, say we're looking at a content block like this. Which being member is your bias. So if you're reading through something like this, it's kind of boring, and there isn't really like a sense of hierarchy. It kind of feels like everything in the content is like equal. So what I will try to do is to translate it into something like this, where the most important one is like the header, and then next is the body text. Yeah, and then the list. So, sining bini member na ayos nyo? Anyway. Okay, space best. Yeah. What I'm trying to say here is like there's this thing called kerning, leading, and tracking. KLT or gilid that's how I remember it in my head. So kerning is like the spacing in between two letters. Leading is the spacing between two lines, and tracking is the spacing on all of the letters. Yeah. So typically you would forego spacing the kerning because you will only do kerning adjustment with logo types or with print. Yeah. And just to prove a point, this is like feel free to read through this. Hi bahala. So yeah. So as you can see, like it's a little bit hard to like read like this excerpt, right? The line height is at 90% on Figma, but once we try to give it a little space, okay. Pwede na, yeah. But I would further extend this so that it kind of looks like it's on print. So currently, the one previously is 100%. This is 125%. It's line height. So as you can see, it's a lot easier to read already. But if we go back to like the letter spacing at 0%, I purposely made it bad, by the way, and try to get rid of the rags. Yeah, and it becomes a lot easier. It's a lot easier to read. Nung dinner, anong nangyari? Inabot ko kay Papi. Yeah. So, about to print, just a couple of slides left. Context is king. So what I'm trying to say here. So my personal opinion, fonts exudes feels. So depending on the font that you're using, it really helps when it comes to the context of the content that you're trying to share. So for example, sinabong mahal kita. Yeah. In this font, I use Anton here. It's kind of boring, right? But if you're using something like this, wow, it's like mahal kita. So it's kind of like a lot more thoughtful when it comes to like in the design. But it kind of switches its emotion if you use something like this, where it's either a note from a kid to a parent, or your handwriting just sucks. But it really depends on like the context. But if you say something like this, it's kind of like you're like a serial killer is out for your stalker. Anyway, yeah, or a horny ghost. See, it all ties in together. Okay, last but not least is to test the waters, like what we've learned from the previous presentations. And what I'm just trying to say here is to consider these properties. So contrast, accessibility, readability, and legibility. So in typography, I would typically look at these so that I make sure that the reading experience is good. So if you find it hard to remember, it's CARL. So remember Carl, contrast, accessibility, readability, legibility. So the reason why I split contrast and accessibility, because a lot of like the smaller projects or projects that you started typically won't think about accessibility. So it's imperative that at least you do the contrast. And there are a lot of resources. She touched on some of it a while ago. And it's basically the ally checklist. So, like what I said, 95% of content is in typography, right? So, one website that I look at is the checklist from the Ally project, and it basically runs down like all of the checklists that you can follow for people with disabilities, like reading disabilities, dyslexia, and all of the other accessibility improvements that you can do. So I mentioned that at least contrast, right? So you can go do this, any accessibility checker, but the one that I go to is accessibilitychecker.com, or .org, sorry, where it's a very simple color contrast, and I make sure that my presentation is actually like AAA on large text. So yeah, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So it's gonna take time, but you'll eventually find your perfect type. And thank you so much. If you want to contact me, just go to www.gel.win or hey@gel.win. So yeah, thank you. So how many beans am I gonna eat?
4.
4.